Hi there, and welcome to a very special Heard Online episode where we're going to look at something that just it baffled me how similar some of the ideas presented in this article were to my own. And you know, a very common question here in our community is like, why is CBTi always talked about so much? Why is it considered the gold standard? And the very reasons this is the case comes up in this article we're going to look at. And the reason we're looking at this today, by the way, is we have a new coach in training. Her name is Pauline, and she used to be a psychotherapist. And she brought this up in our like coaches only like Slack channel. It was so interesting, so fascinating to me that I really want to share it with everyone in the community. So without further ado, let's take a look at this article from Psychotherapy Networker. I think actually this was like a blog post on a forum. It was Chris Lifeward's ideas that made it into like, this is kind of an abbreviation of a blog post that they're presenting here in Psychotherapy Networker. Let's just jump in and read this. So Chris says, for nearly 50 years, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, has claimed higher scientific authority among the vast legion of psychotherapy approaches as a result of having more research demonstrate its effectiveness than any other therapeutic method. Increasingly, that track record of empirical evidence has been acknowledged and even translated into government funders and insurance companies requiring therapists to use CBT if they want to be reimbursed. But recent developments have raised questions about whether the effectiveness and scientific bona fides of CBT have been overstated. Now, I just want to point something out here. Yes, this is something we see very often, that the only type of therapy that insurance will pay for is CBT. And I think this may be mentioned later on, but a reason for this is that CBT is kind of very rigid, and it has like this is a 4-week course, 6-week course, 8-week course. So of course, insurers, like, they find that appealing, like, okay, we know exactly how much we're paying for. And and from a government standpoint too, they're also a payer, right? This has been very appealing, but there are some questions around this. So yeah, let's just keep reading. Developed largely within university settings concerned with quantifiable research results, CBT has been the focus of far more studies than any other therapy model. Almost 90% of the approaches deemed empirically supported by the American Psychological Association's Division 12 Task Force on Psychological Interventions involve cognitive behavioral treatments. More than 269 meta-analyses have conducted on CBT, et cetera, et cetera. It just emphasizes how this has been kind of like the only thing. And what really struck me when I read this sentence was like, it's developed within university settings concerned with quantifiable research results. In other words, if you don't have numbers, it is very hard to get published. And if you can't get published, it's hard to get new funding. It's hard to, rise up the ranks and become, a professor or whatever it is you want to accomplish as a within academia. But this is why I think CBTi definitely, but I think probably CBT in general is very, very tricky, because it's aimed to produce numbers and to track numbers. And we know so well from all the work we've done in our space that numbers are so tricky. As soon as we think that, oh, I should be sleeping well after 6 weeks of the 6-week program, there is pressure from the number 6 weeks, for example. Or if I think my sleep efficiency, which is like how much we sleep out of the time we spent in bed, should be 85%, there's pressure from there. We think that I have to fall asleep to get that 85% threshold so I can spend more time in bed, and sleep restriction is all about. So again, the whole idea of like, CBTi is like, it's developed in a university setting to produce numbers that can be published, right? But in the real world, that translates into like a lot of struggle. And the thing is with this, like, when studies are published, they may show, for example, that in this group, the sleep efficiency went from 72% to like 87%, and they say this was successful. But if that means that you took somebody from like spending 8 hours in bed to spending like 5 hours in bed, but they sleep even less, but the proportion of sleep is greater, so the sleep efficiency is good. That well, it's not something they need to publish, right? As long as they have some number that goes up, CBTi is it continues to be kind of held up as this gold standard because of things like this. So when I read this sentence, I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I've been thinking. So yeah, I really get excited about that sentence. So anyways, let's keep reading. Recent findings, and by the way, this is not super recent. I think this is from 2015 when this was written. But anyways, recent findings about the effectiveness of CBT have made waves among psychotherapy outcome researchers. A 2013 meta-analysis published in Clinical Psychological Review compared CBT to other therapies and reported that it failed to provide corroborative evidence for the conjecture that CBT is superior to bona fide non-CBT treatments. In other words, it's not better than other things. There was another large study from Norway here that had looked at the effectiveness of CBT for depression from 1977 to 2014, and basically found that the effects have declined in a linear way and very steadily since its introduction, as measured by patients' self-report, clinicians' ratings, and rates of remission. And the authors, interestingly, are trying to explain the reasons for this decline, right? This is Johnson and Freeborg from Norway, and they suggested basically that the early CBT by Beck and Ellis reflected protocol-driven, highly goal-oriented, more standardized approach, in contrast with the looser, more integrative approach of modern CBT. And they're basically saying that today's CBT therapists are a little bit more kind of loosey-goosey and not staying to this strictly like protocol-driven approach. And to me, that just doesn't sound like that could make sense at all, right? Any like goal orientation, if anything, to me means more struggle, right? Now another I think this is maybe somebody here named Steve Holland says, it may be that we're just seeing the more variable results you're going to get in the real world, basically arguing that the initially the reason why CBTi or CBT, I should say, looked so good was that it was like they probably like kind of cherry picked like good candidates, in these university settings, like this is going to be a good candidate, and they had a protocol, and it was like the studies were based on findings in a very kind of controlled setting. But in the real world, you find something different, right? And I think this mirrors the experience we see in our community, that certain research studies that are kind of like, you kind of cherry pick the subjects, and you do it in a very controlled way. You choose what results you present. Like, it can make CBTi look like a gold standard, but in the real world, we see something very different. Our most recent guest, Alexander, last week said that he couldn't have imagined a more like I think he used the word torturous, like a torture-like experience than what he had with sleep restriction. So anyways, this is kind of a really sort of a pet subject of mine to try to understand why why we have this divide, that this is considered the gold standard, but we see over and over again that it doesn't help that many people, right? So I just want to conclude with the fact that I thought this was very interesting and refreshing, and seeing that there is some of this kind of introspection and pondering within the sort of like CBT and CBT research community. I thought that was very interesting. And finally, I think I believe that we may be in the beginning of a revolution. I think we may be beginning of the kind of like the revolution where new ideas, new ways to look at things start to like really become widespread. And if you think about it, like if you have any type of problem, any type of issue, right, in life, who would you turn to? Like, who would you trust the most? Would you trust the person who's like has studied the problem kind of at a safe distance and observed it and pondered it, or would you trust somebody who's actually gone through it, who has gone through the trouble and kind of come out on the other side and fully understands the experience? I somehow think most of us would rather learn from the latter. So this kind of like peer-to-peer support that we're seeing like within our school and that we're seeing like develop in other places, I I think it has its own kind of challenges. It may not be like there's maybe a complete lack of like methodology and structure, but it also it has a promise. It has a promise of like the hive mind, people getting together and exchanging experiences and learning from each other. I think we can see this kind of like this inner revolution where like the truth emerges, like the most helpful approach to meet these inner struggles will emerge. Because I think there is such a thing as like fundamental truth in this space, and it can just give way for like a new reality where we humans like finally start to like fully understanding ourselves. That was it. I hope you found some. I hope you don't find this. You find more value in this than me just rambling. But anyways, whatever you thought, love to hear it in the comment section, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And oh yeah, by the way, last thing here, since it's Thanksgiving here in the US, we won't do our live Q&A tomorrow, and there actually won't be more content this week. This is the last content for this week, but we'll be back next week as usual. So I'll look forward to seeing you next week, and hope that you have a nice Thanksgiving if you're stateside. All right, bye for